So I did, and those 15 weeks changed my life. At the first time at the age of 34 years old, I admitted I was an alcoholic. First time I stopped blaming the sheriff for arresting me. For the first time, I realized the prosecutor and the judge did their job. And for the first time, I actually realized that my dad was a good man and he loved me the best way he knew how. And I started facing the reality that it was nothing that he done. It was all within inside of me. And those 15 weeks changed. I started looking who I was. I started actually getting up 15 minutes early before 6 a.m. count. And I'd read out the little daily reflections that one of the guys gave me. And I would say a little prayer. And it wasn't the foxhole prayer. It wasn't a prayer for myself. It was from my mom and from my grandma.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. Greetings from Studio AA, deep in the heart of Texas. That was the voice of our friend Mr. Brent H. that you heard at the beginning of this episode. And you're going to hear so much more from him in just a moment. But first things first, this episode is made possible by Tony, Kate, and David. And so you ask yourself, what exactly did Tony and Kate and David do? Well, they went to our humble little website, www.soberspeak.com. They clicked on the little, I think I left a W out of that. I think I said WW, not WWW. I'm not sure exactly what I did. Anyway, they clicked on the little yellow donation tab and made a contribution. So thank you so much, Tony, Kate, and David. This here episode is coming right out to you'ns. All right, everybody. So we're going to get, I do want to let you know, though, right before we go into this, I'm doing this way ahead of schedule. And the reason I'm doing it way ahead of schedule is because I'm about to go in for some surgery tomorrow. And it's a gum surgery on my gums. And apparently this type of surgery is going to make me eat bananas for like 3 weeks. And so I am a little concerned about getting new episodes out and whether I'll be able to do that. So I'm just going to get a little ahead of the game and hope the gum surgery goes okay. And we'll take it a step at a time. Who knows? One of three things, I guess. Either I'll be back on schedule, or maybe I have to miss a week, or I come back and I just can't talk right or something like that. I don't know exactly what's going to happen through this. So anyway, now on to our featured guest of the week. His name is Brent H. And we're calling this one is 15 Weeks That Changed My Life. Brent has been sober for 28 years and he resides in Los Angeles, California. However, he grew up on an Angus beef farm in a small community in Missouri. Buckle up your seats. You are definitely in for an incredible story. You want to listen to this one all the way through. We discuss, among many things, how Brent ended up in LA after growing up in Missouri. how he idolized his father and longed for his father's approval. And then that fateful day where Brent would no longer be able to seek that approval. And I will let Brent share that story in his own words. Brent talks about his dry drunk years as an inmate and what that experience was like. Per the title of this episode, you can see there was 15 weeks that changed Brent's life while he was incarcerated. Brent discusses the time that his grandmother told him, "You have a light behind your eyes," because she had not seen that light in many years after he had received 2 life sentences. Brent talks about how he experienced freedom while living in a maximum security facility. And he discusses his amends to his father. And that, folks, is just the tip of the iceberg. I now present to you, without further ado, Mr. Brent H. And we will have plenty listener feedback at the end of this episode. Enjoy, Brent. Okay, everybody. So today we are sitting here. We are very fortunate here to be sitting here with Mr. Brent H. So, Brent, why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, give your sobriety date if you wish, and tell people where you live in this great land of ours, please.
My name is Brent. I am an alcoholic. I have a sobriety date of August 27th, 1996, and I now reside in Los Angeles, California.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a second because I know you're not from LA, but you're in LA now, right?
That is correct.
And let's tell people how we came across each other. Anytime I get a recommendation from a friend, Bill C., there in Hermosa Beach, California, I am quick to jump on it. And he just had a lot of great things to say about you. And I don't know if you know this. I believe your sponsor is Harold, right?
That is correct. Harold in St. Louis, yes.
Yeah. So I recorded Harold like several weeks ago.
Okay.
And I think probably by the time we get this out, he's gonna be released as well. He'll get to come on first. But yeah, I recorded Harold a few weeks ago. It was good to. Oh, he's a classy guy.
Yes, he is. I've been very fortunate. He's been sponsored my entire 28 years, so I've been very
Wow.
blessed.
And I'm also, I just want to tell you, I am very impressed that, when I come on to record with people, I tell people, hey, if you could have either a USB mic or like a wired headset or something like that, it'd be great because then they sound much better, right? And you went out and you actually got it, and I'm looking at it and I'm very, very impressed.
First set I've ever had here, so it's new for me, and I hope it works well.
Well, good. You'll be able to use those now and all. You probably do Zoom calls and all that kind of
Absolutely.
stuff. Yeah, and your voice is coming through very nicely, and I
All right.
appreciate that. All right. So, let's talk then a little bit about Brent, where you came from, like I said, experience, strength, and hope, what it was like, or what you were like, what happened, what you're like now. So, where do you want to start? I believe you grew up in Missouri. Am I right?
I grew up in Southwest Missouri on an Angus beef farm, and I consider that in the middle of absolutely nowhere. I was 22 miles from anywhere that was even close to a town. Growing up on that farm, I pretty much hated my childhood just because I had no friends. I had nobody out there to play with. I'm an only child. Most people automatically think, oh, only child, you had it made, you was spoiled, no hand-me-downs. Won't argue about that. On the flip side, though, if the chores aren't done, something gets broken around the house, I don't have a brother or sister to blame it on. So there's pros and cons that go both ways. Um, Growing up on that farm, I 100% idolized my dad. Everything I did to get my dad's approval, to get my dad's pat on the back, get my dad to tell me that he loved me. And that just really wasn't who my dad was. It was just you did things one way, and that was the only way to do them. Alcoholism ran pretty rampant in my family. Neither one of my grandfathers ever made it to the age of 60, and my uncle died at the age of 42. And I can remember the last time I saw my uncle, I was standing in the hospital at the foot of his bed, and his stomach was so enlarged, so bloated because his kidneys and liver had shut down, I could not even see his face. So that is not the reason I am an alcoholic, but the alcoholism ran in my family. I took my first drink when I was 9. And the reason I did that was even after first and second grade, when I was in school, I was around kids, I just wasn't comfortable. I was not happy being me. I knew kids was either talking about my dirty jeans. I knew they was talking about my boots. I knew they were talking about something, and I just didn't fit in. And I would watch on the weekends that my grandfathers, my uncle, everybody in the family would have drinks. And I noticed after that first or second one, their smiles got a little bit bigger. And then after the third or fourth one, they started laughing and carrying on. And by the time the afternoon was over, they're all just having a blast. So that afternoon, when I was told to go get some beers and bring them back, if there's anything left, I finished it off or I took a sip on the way taken back. And before that afternoon was over, I started having this tingling feeling inside me, and I started feeling a little bit different. And I knew whatever was in those cans in that bottle that they were drinking and making them happy, I knew it was starting to affect me. Now, my drinking did not take off at the age of 9, but I learned real quick at the age of 9 that those bottles gave me something that I'd been looking for. It gave me something to make me feel different than who I was in my own skin. Growing up in that small town, if anybody knows anything about small town sports rule, and I guess maybe I was better than average because they moved me up to play ball with the older guys. Um, didn't fit in with kids my own age, sure didn't fit in with them, but I knew at the age of 13, 14 that my drinking needed to escalate because that's what they were doing. So I started drinking more just to try and get to fit in, just to try to be part of the group. Um, I'll move up to when I was 16 years old. There was 5 carloads of us coming back from a float trip. The lead car had a wreck. One of the girls was killed. Her parents and mine had known each other before Joe and I was even born. They asked me to be one of the pallbearers the morning of the funeral. I showed up drunk, stumbled carrying the casket, made a real fool out of myself. And that was the first time people started telling me that maybe I needed to slow down on my drinking. I need to slow down on what I was doing. It was real simple. I didn't care. This is the way I dealt with things, and I told people just to leave me alone. At this point in time with my dad, it was just that same scenario. I tried to do everything to get his approval. I'd bring a B home from school. He wanted to know why it wasn't an A. I brought an A home from school. That's the reason you go to school. My junior year, we ended up having one of the better ball teams in that little hometown that anyone had ever saw. We ended up going to the state. We lost in the quarterfinals. I really played one of the better games I'd ever played. And I just knew my dad was going to be proud of me, even though we lost. As soon as I got in the door, all he could do was tell me what I did wrong in the second half. If I'd have passed here, if I'd have shot here, maybe we'd have won and be playing for the state championship. So by my senior year, I was learning that there was nothing that I was going to do where I could get his approval. My drinking started escalating. I started drinking before I went to class. I would drink when I would get home. I would hide bottles on the farm. I would drink when I was out doing chores. When I graduated high school, I really thought that I would be like everybody else in that little hometown. Marry your hometown sweetheart, you get your own place, you get a job, you raise a family there, and that's it. My dad wanted me to go to college. Last thing I wanted to do was go to college because I hated school when I was in school. So that entire summer where all my buddies are getting their own place, doing their own thing, I'm stuck on the farm waiting to go to school. That fall, I packed up, went to college. By day 3, I realized that maybe I had just fallen into paradise. I joined a fraternity, alcohol flowing 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and I had found my people. No one was telling me to slow down on my drinking. No one was telling me to stop doing what I was doing. And my drinking absolutely exploded. And it was the same scenario with my dad. Bring a B or C home. He wanted to know why it wasn't an A. If I did bring an A home, he said, that's the reason I sent you there. By my sophomore year, I started losing a few friends because people didn't want to ride in the car with me anymore. I drove too fast. I drove too stupid. My attitude toward girls at this time was real simple. You like to drink, you like to party, we hung out. You did not. I moved on to somebody else. My junior year, I fell into probably the greatest opportunity there was for a kid in college. I became the college rep for the Anheuser-Busch distributorship there on campus, and all those other fraternities who hated me because I got loud, because I got obnoxious, because no one wanted me around, they all wanted me around. They loved me all of a sudden. They wanted me to put the big blow-up bush can in their yard on the weekends. They wanted me to hand out T-shirts. They wanted me to hand out freebies. And I knew that they didn't like me. They just liked me for what I could give them. And I
Right.
was getting that attention, and I craved that attention. At this point in time, alcohol was kind of at a 50-50. Had some really good times on it, but at the same time, it wasn't doing what it used to do for me. I still had all those fears of what people were thinking about me. I still had all those insecurities. I still knew that people were talking about me. And it was just to the point that alcohol wasn't doing what it used to do for me. Somehow I did graduate college, got my degree, got a job, paying my bills, doing great. People are still on my case about slowing down, and I told them I'm doing just fine, leave me alone. A couple years after I graduated, my mom gave me a call, said that my dad was having some issues on the farm, asked if I could come home and help out anyway. So I took a week off work. I came home on a Sunday. Monday morning, I woke up. He had this list of things that needed to be done. Of course, I do what I always do. I grabbed me a 6-pack of beer, headed out to the barn because one of the chores he wanted was part of the barn painted. So I went out there and I saw all this paint he'd bought. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I can paint this section of the barn that he wants, not use all the paint, save him some money, and we'll get the week started off on the right foot. So when he came out later that afternoon, he didn't tell me I did a good job. He didn't tell me I did a bad job. He just asked me why I didn't use all the paint. I said I didn't need to use all the paint. I got the job done, saved you some money. He said if I wanted to save the money, I wouldn't have bought it. The reason I bought it is because I wanted you to use it. And you might say at this point in time in my life, alcohol was no longer working for me. I couldn't quiet the voices in my head. I couldn't fill up this void in my heart. And after 25 years of trying to get my dad to be proud of me, to get that approval, to get that pat on the back, all come to a head that afternoon. My father and I proceeded to get into a heated argument, and I murdered him that afternoon. I'll never know what I did to my mother. My mom stood beside me from day one, second one. I got arrested on a Friday. She bailed me out Monday. Now, I've had people ask me over the time, said, that must have been your rock bottom. Unfortunately for this alcoholic, I've got a ways to go because for those next 10 months, my drinking absolutely exploded. It took me into darkness that I couldn't get out of. I drank in the morning, I drank in the afternoon, I drank at night. And if I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, I would drink some more because I couldn't quiet the voices in my head and I couldn't suppress the feelings that was in my heart. I got through those 10 months, went to court. I was convicted of second-degree murder, armed criminal action. I was given 2 life sentences. On October 3rd, 1987, I went to prison. It took this alcoholic exactly 13 days to learn how to make hooch, and I proceeded to make homemade wine when I was in prison so I could keep these voices quiet in my head. And if I couldn't finagle and manipulate and get the products that I needed to make the hooch, I would buy a 6-ounce bottle of aftershave out of the canteen. I would cook it down to a 1-shot glass and I would drink it. Anything to quiet these voices. Now,
So I just want to, uh, you know, I just want to like tap the brakes a little bit
sure,
here
sure.
and go back. And what I mean by that is, I mean, you just laid a pretty significant bomb out there, right? Uh, you took the life of your father,
Yeah.
and looking back on that now, being able to reflect on it, is there? I mean, I'm just wondering if you have any other thoughts on it. I know you're going on with kind of what happened after that, but I'm sure you had a lot of time, both in prison, and I think we're going to talk about that, and otherwise to think about that. What I mean, what else do you want to say about that? Is there anything in particular?
Well, of course, if I could take that day back, I would. There's not a day really that I wake up and when I say my prayers and I go through my meditations and stuff in the morning. I always think about that day. I can never take it back. I try to live my life better today by the steps of this program and the way I've been taught in my recovery. I realize now that my father was 100% a loving man. He was a good man. He provided for my mom. He provided for me. It was just that I needed something from him, I thought, that he could not give. My dad was not the person to give you that pat on the back. My dad was not the person to say, I love you, I'm proud of you. It was like, you just do things the way you're supposed to do them, and that should be enough. Well, for me, I could not fill this void in my heart because I needed that from him. And alcohol did that for me for years and years and years. And then it quit working. And I could not get enough inside me to quiet that hole that I had. I see now that maybe times were different. Maybe being raised was different, whatever it was. I don't, I'm not into all that, but my dad provided for us. He gave everything that he could from himself. At the time, I was just selfish, insecure, full of fear, and it just wasn't enough for me.
Have you, in the meantime, been able to go out to his grave or anything like that?
I will get that to my story, but part of my amends was I did go to the gravesite. My sponsor had me write a letter because I'd had this amends. He told me to do when I was in prison. I said, well, I can't do amends while I'm in prison. So he told me to get 3x5 cards, write the people's name down, how I'd harmed, what it was, fear, whatever. And I kept putting his at the bottom. I kept putting his at the bottom. I kept putting his at the bottom. And Harold finally told me, says, the day's come. So I wrote a letter. My sponsor rode with me for 3.5 hours. We went to his gravesite. I sat there and read the letter. I was on my knees. I cried. I bawled. My sponsor stood beside me for a while. He gave me some private time for a while. I was there. I don't know. I didn't time it. I'm going to say maybe 40, 45 minutes. And I think when I left that day that I had made peace. And the only thing I could do to make amends was to live my life the way I needed to live it each day forward. And I felt that my dad had accepted me and had forgiven me and that we move forward. Do I still wish I could change that day? Absolutely. Do I still think about it every day I wake up? Absolutely. But I'm living my life the best I can because I believe that he has heard what I had to say.
Okay. All right. Let's get back on track here. So I know you said that next 10 months. Okay. So, and you said the next 10 months you were drinking heavily. Does that mean you were not in jail at that time,
My
or
mom,
were you
I
awaiting
was
trial?
I was arrested on a Friday. She bailed me out Monday. And
Okay.
so I
Gotcha.
was
Gotcha.
at home with her and I just drank every time I could get something. And she did not prevent me from buying liquor. So I bought it and I would drink it morning, afternoon, evening. And there were some times that when I woke up in the middle of the night, I would drink more. And that's how I literally lived for the 10 months till I went to court.
And you mentioned you were in a small town. My guess is it was difficult to have any sort of relationships with people in the town at the same time.
The town was pretty much split. Some of them supported my mom and everything for believing in me and standing behind me, and others talked about her unmercifully and pretty much ostracized her. So, like I said, when I say I do not know everything I did to my mother, I do not know what all she endured because I know she kept stuff from me.
Wow. Yeah, I just wanted to tap the brakes and talk
Sure.
about that a little bit because that is obviously a very significant event. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you did that for 10 months. And then what happens? Does a trial come up or what goes
Um,
on then?
Actually, they dropped the charges down 1 degree. And I went to just before a judge, and the judge sentenced me. So went before the judge, gave me 2 life sentences, one's for the murder, one for the armed criminal action, and I went to prison October 3rd, 1987.
Okay. All right. So let's pick it up from there. So you were in prison October 3rd, 1987. Take me through Well, so we have a gap from 1987 now to your sobriety date, 1996. Take
Yeah,
me through those years.
yeah. I proceeded to learn how to make homemade wine. I drank in there. I made it. Like I said, if I couldn't finagle, steal, or get the ingredients I needed, I actually would cook down a 6 ounce bottle of aftershave just so I could get a shot glass just to drink. Um, my mother and my grandmother visited me every single Thursday. They drove 2+ hours, and it didn't matter in Missouri if it was August and 104, if it was January with 9 inches of snow. They drove 2.5 hours to visit me every Thursday. And when I had something still inside my system and I had something to kind of quiet the voices.
So, just real quick, so your mother and your grandmother, what was their kind of take on all this? Were they, I don't know, were they I mean, obviously they were supportive by coming to see you,
Mhm.
but did they? And it's a tragedy in the family, I'm sure. But were they? Did they understand? Were they upset? And you can tell me about their mindset a little bit.
They never talked about it with me. I tried a couple of times and my mother didn't would never talk about it. She just says, "I'm here for you." And my grandmother was just there with her. So there was never really any deep conversations about any of it.
Okay. Okay.
And it's the way she was. She didn't want to talk about it, so we didn't.
Understood. All right. So you're making this homemade hooch there within the walls. It was did it I'm always just curious, is it when you're making it, is it for self-consumption or is it to sell and make some money or a combination of both?
Combination of both. Some of it was to make a little money. Most of it was just for me, just to suppress the voices in my head, and so I wouldn't have to feel or think about things.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So how many years did that go on?
So I made that and drank until January 1st, 1992. I woke in my cell floor, my own blood, my own puke. That nasty hooch and everything not being filtered. It was eating my stomach lining up. I still refused to admit that I was an alcoholic, so I just quit drinking. And I will tell anyone for the next 4 years, I really believe I might have been one of the most miserable dry drunks there were. And the reason I say that is because that mother and that grandmother that come to visit me every Thursday, when I was drinking and using, I hugged them. I kissed them. I thanked them for coming to visit me. I thanked them for bringing that little bag of quarters so I could get a sandwich or a soda out of the vending machine while we was in the visiting room. And after January 1st, 1992, when I didn't have anything to quiet the voices in the head, when they would come into the visiting room, I was so arrogant. I was so broken. I was so beat down. My attitude to them would be like, visiting room open 19 minutes ago. Where have you been? I've been waiting. I know there were times I didn't hug them, but I would grab that little bag of quarters and go get something for myself immediately. And then I complained that there wasn't enough quarters in there so I could get a second sandwich. And I'm ashamed to say that there was probably sometimes I didn't even thank them for coming up to visit me or that I loved them. And I was truly, at this point in time during these 4 years, as broken as a human being could be. I would, as it talks about in the big books, how we're financially, but it had nothing to do with money. I was spiritually, I was morally, I had nothing left in me. I was totally bankrupt. There was a couple guys in there that had been on me for years that I was an alcoholic. And at this point in time, I had no fuse left. I had nothing left inside me, and I was ready just to swing on one of them. And I said, "What do I have to do to get you two guys off my back? Because I am so sick and tired of this." They said, "You go to an AA meeting, we'll leave you alone." I said, "I go to one meeting, you two will own your word and never say another word to me." And they said, "Yes." So I signed up. Takes a couple weeks to get on the call out. I went to the AA meeting that Sunday night. I sat in the very back corner of the room. I stared down at the floor, wondering when the 60 minutes was going to be up. I sure did not say what my name was. I did not admit that I was an alcoholic. I just stared down at the floor. The 60 minutes was up. I probably pushed two chairs out of the way. I know I tripped over one, got out the door, walked back to my cell, and wondered, are these guys going to honor their word? They didn't say a word to me on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or the rest of the week. And the only thing I can tell anyone, I look at it now, they talk about when you get to step 12, how you're going to have a spiritual experience. I kept thinking, was I going to have this big burning bush? Was some great thing going to happen? I look back on it now. I had a spiritual experience that night that I didn't realize, because that following Sunday evening when they called AA over the intercom, I went back to that room. And I sat in that same chair and I sat in that same corner and I stared at the floor and I talked to myself for 60 minutes and asked myself, why am I back here? And I proceeded to do that for 3 months and never said a word. And finally, one night I looked up and I started listening to those men, and they were talking about me. They were talking about how they never fit in. They was talking about how they was never comfortable in their own skin. They talked about how they was full of fear of what others thought of them, how they was insecure around friends and women. They talked about this hole that they could not fill. They talked about how they had great times drinking and using and partying, and then it stopped working. And I grabbed a big book off the desk that night, and I took it back to my cell for the first time. And I read a couple paragraphs, and I thought, well, this isn't too bad. Then I read a couple paragraphs, and I was like, it hit home. I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to deal with it. And I threw that book on my bunk, and it lay there for 2 or 3 more days. And this is how I cycled through for almost 1 year of going to AA meetings. 11 months in, 3 men who brought the meetings into the prison for us to have it put on what they called a big book workshop. I thought, what the hell? I don't have nothing else to lose. 15 weeks long, gets me on my cell on a Wednesday night. We sign a little agreement that you're going to be there. If you don't, you can get wrote up, a violation, whatever. And I thought, I don't have anything else. So I did. And those 15 weeks changed my life. At the first time at the age of 34 years old, I admitted I was an alcoholic. First time I stopped blaming the sheriff for arresting me. For the first time, I realized the prosecutor and the judge did their job. And for the first time, I actually realized that my dad was a good man and he loved me the best way he knew how. And I started facing the reality that it was nothing that he done. It was all within inside of me. And those 15 weeks changed. I started looking who I was. I started actually getting up 15 minutes early before 6 a.m. count. And I'd read out the little daily reflections that one of the guys gave me. And I would say a little prayer. And it wasn't the foxhole prayer. It wasn't a prayer for myself. It was from my mom and from my grandma. And I started doing this every day, 15 minutes early. And it talks about a page in the big book where it says others will see changes in ourselves before we see them. Others will see changes in us before we see them in ourselves. I was on a visit one time and my grandmother said, it's so good to see my grandson again. And I said, Grandma, you see me every week. What are you talking about? And she said, no, you have light behind your eyes. And I realized that something was going on in me that I did not realize. And I remember that part in the big book where she was seeing a change in me I did not know. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity because I was able to make amends to her, because one of those 3 men I grabbed as a sponsor, and I had him come in once a month. He could come in an hour early and we would go over the steps and started working through things. And it got to that amends part. And I told him, how do I make amends in prison? I can't make amends. And like I explained to you, I did the 3x5 cards. And he says, you've already made amends to your grandmother. You've already made amends to your mom. You can make amends while you're in here. And I'm grateful I did, because my grandmother died about 6 months later. And I'm so grateful that I was able to make amends to my mom, because she started dealing with cancer and it went in and out of remission 3 different times. And on that 3rd time, she said, I can't deal with this no more. I don't have the fight left in me. And she ended up passing away before I ever got out. And that lady stood beside me like no one else has ever stood beside me in my entire life. Now, I pray on this call and whoever's listening that no one ever has to go to prison. But if you do have to go to prison, you're probably going to be like me, and you're going to try and drag everybody you can in there with you. First off, all those friends that I thought were my friends, not one of them ever called me or come to see me. Second, if you got a dog, you're going to try to drag the dog in there with you. You're going to try and drag a cat in there. You're going to try and drag whatever you can. I had a lady and two girls that I tried to drag in there with me. Of course, after about 18 months, she said, "This is not the life for me," and moved on. One night I got a letter at mail call, which mail's precious in prison because most of it has nobody left in our lives that even want to associate with us. And it had her name up there and return address. Now, being the good alcoholic I was, I couldn't just open the letter right then. I had laid on my desk for 3 days, and I came up with about 3,427 scenarios. That's what that letter said. And after driving myself crazy for 3 days, I opened it up. She had her number, and she said, "Will you please give me a call?" Well, I knew I couldn't wait 3 days because I'd already driven myself crazy, so I went down there, got in line, made a phone call, and she said, "Am I still on your visiting list? Can I come visit you?" Now, most people are going to start spitting the days, the times, the hours. "Yes, please come see me." My first words out of my mouth was, "Why?" She said, "I'd been talking to your mom. She said, you've been making some changes in your life, and I want to come see you." So I think it was 3 weeks later, she made arrangements. She'd come to visit me. And it's not what I'm proud of, but for the first time in my life, in my late 30s, I started carrying on a conversation with a woman without any ulterior motives. Didn't have to worry about what dinner I had to take her to. Didn't have to worry about stupid movie I had to sit through because she wanted to see it and I cared nothing about it. We were not having sex because state of Missouri does not have conjugal visits. So we had nothing but just to carry on conversation. And I actually talked to a woman and we just talked and we got to know each other all over again, starting from scratch. And for whatever reason, and I will never be able to answer this question, that lady wanted to stay with me, and we got married in the visiting room of that prison, and she stuck with me for over a decade till I got out. I became a husband. I became a father. The girls would visit me on their own without her as they got older, and started becoming a human again. Now, even in the state of Missouri with 2 life sentences, you have the opportunity for parole. So I went for parole that first time, and I thought, oh, Lord, they're going to see what a changed man I am. I've admitted I was an alcoholic. I've got my family back. I'm making amends. They're going to give me a chance. I went up. It lasted 6 minutes, and they said, "Mr. Huff, we'll see you in 5 years." I walked out of that room, and I cussed God. I cussed AA. I got on the phone. I told Debbie to file for divorce. I said, "This is the stupidest thing you've ever done. I'm never coming home." And she told me we're going to get through this, to shut up. She was in Al-Anon, so she just called it the way it was at this point in time. And those next 5 years, I changed my routine. Instead of getting up 15 minutes early before count, I got up 30 minutes early. And I read out of the daily reflections, and I read out of the big book. And whatever month it was, that was the step. I read that step that month. And that was my routine for 5 years. And I got through it. My mother passed away. My grandmother's now gone. I got through those 5 years, went up for parole again. I thought, well, we'll see what happens. Lasted a little longer than 6 minutes, lasted about 12 or 15. They said, "We'll see you in 2 years. And my pity potty lasted about 1 day. And I just started strengthening the effort of what I was doing. I started working with other inmates in there for the first time. I started sharing with them. I was going to be vulnerable. I was showing my weakness in there. I was trying to help someone else and getting out of myself. Went up for parole 2 years later. It lasted 57 minutes. They talked about things I did not know I had done in high school, things I'd never done. They talked about what I'd done to my dad. They threw pictures on the table. It took them 73 days to give me an answer, and they said, "We'll see you in 2 more years." And for the first time getting a rejection, I was good with that. Because if I got out and went home when I wanted to, I did not have the foundation of this program. I had not worked these steps, and I know I would have gone out and failed, used, and been right back in prison. And for the first time during those next 2 years, I looked in the cell in the morning when I brushed my teeth and I would shave, and I liked that guy I saw in that mirror. For the first time, I liked who he was. And I had a freedom living in a maximum security prison in a cell that I had never experienced being on the street. And I went up 2 years later. I got an out date, and I walked out of prison October 3rd, 2008, 21 years to the day. And there's not one thing I did that opened them doors then, because in the state of Missouri, when I was sentenced, you should have done 15 years on life. I should have done 30 years. I got out in 21. Now, I have to tell you about these first 30 days of getting out of prison because it was so important to me. I got home on a Friday afternoon. Saturday morning, two men showed up my door I'd never met before in my life, 10 a.m., said, "Are you Brent?" I said, "Yeah," and said, "Harold L. told us to take you to a meeting." I went to my first AA meeting less than 24 hours out of prison. That Sunday afternoon, my wife told me I need to go downstairs and go through a couple of boxes. I thought there was stuff of my mom's and my grandmother's, and I wasn't ready for it yet. She said, "No, it's not that. You just need to go down there." And there was two huge shipping boxes down there, and they had gifts in them. And I started looking at them. It said, "Merry Christmas, Dad, 1999. Happy birthday, Dad, 2004." They had gifts in there. And the reason I shared this is there was not one gift in those boxes before 1996 when I went to my first AA meeting. And that told me right there just how powerful this program is and the gifts and the miracles that can happen if you work these steps. Monday night, a man invited me to his home. He fixed me a steak dinner and took me to an AA meeting. That night right there, I learned that everybody in the freed world was crazier than I was. This man had a 6-month-old son. And he invited me into his home, and I point blank asked him, "Why would you invite a convicted murderer who's been out 3 days into your home with your family?" He said, "Because those three men that are in your life, that was in your life in prison, they're in my life. And they told me you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do, and I'm just giving back what they freely gave to me." And I learned right there that everything I had known and thought as friendship, everything I know that I thought was important was starting to change because everyone out there in AA was showing me what real friendship was. When I got out, I couldn't get a job. Nobody would hire me. I mean, I could not get a job anywhere. And I was whining to my sponsor. I was crying. He said, "Did you ever stop to think maybe you're not supposed to have a job yet?" I said, "I have to help pay the bills. My PO's on my back." I said, "I have got to get a job." He said, "No, you're not listening. Maybe you're not supposed to have a job yet because you're just supposed to get used to fitting into the world. Maybe you're supposed to just get used to your family and let them get used to you." And I thought, damn, sponsors are always right. And talk about not fitting in. I did not fit in because when I went in 1987, there were no cell phones. There wasn't the internet. There wasn't Google. There wasn't Siri. There was none of that. Today, everybody lives off a computer and a cell phone. I went in, I had a car that had a key to start it and a key to unlock it. Now they have little fobs you beep around. And I did not fit in. But I had a family and a support group in AA that would help walk me through each little stumbling path I needed. In March, I shared my story at a meeting. A gentleman came up to me and he said, "Do you really need a job?" I said, "Yes, I do." He hired me the next morning at 10 a.m. Never asked a question. I worked for him for almost a year. It was pretty hard labor. I was very grateful. Ended up getting hurt. They put a plate in my neck. I really couldn't do the lifting like I needed, but I thank that man for giving me an opportunity. After I went through rehab and strengthened everything and I was free to do whatever I needed to do, it was a week before Thanksgiving. One of those three men had moved away that brought the meeting in that came back home for Thanksgiving. 20 of us went out to dinner, went to a meeting. He asked me how things were going. I told him. He wrote a man's name down on a piece of paper and a phone number. He said, "When Thanksgiving over and the weekend's over, give this man a call." I gave that man a call, went and interviewed with him. I was point blank honest with him. I told him exactly who I was, where I came from. He said, "George told me you'd be honest." He said, "Let's sit and talk." When I talked to him for about an hour and 20 minutes, he said, "This is an extremely unique case." He goes, "I've got to talk to the owners about this." Make a long story short, he called me a week later, asked me when I could start to work. I went to work for that man in a car dealership. I started out as a porter, worked my way up to salesman. For 3 years, I was the top salesman for the dealership. I became a finance manager, a sales manager, and when I walked out and left that place, I was the GSM. They gave me access to keys to 300 brand new vehicles each month. They gave me the security code to where I could unlock the dealership. They gave me complete responsibility, and I only earned that because of what you all in AA taught me, what you all in AA showed me what I needed to do. You told me to suit up, show up, work hard, work smart, work honest, and things will happen when they're supposed to. And that's what they did. Now, those 3x5 cards that I told you about, the day came where I had to go back to that cemetery, and my sponsor rode down there with me, and I explained to you what I did. That is still one of the most powerful amends I've ever made, and probably always will be. And I just believe that somehow, some way, my dad, even to this day, is proud of the man who I am now. Now, if anyone's listening on this, I want you to understand, I'm not sitting here telling anyone if you go to AA, your life is going to be perfect and great things is going to happen every day of your life. That's not true. Life happens and you have to deal with life on life terms. It's just if you're clean, you're sober, you're working these steps, you can deal with the ups and downs that come. Well, that woman that came back into my life and stuck with me till a decade I got out ended up having an accident. And she ended up spending 9 months in ICU. I would go to work. I'd get off at 5 or 6. I would go to the hospital, stay till 4 in the morning, go home, shower, clean up, and I did a routine. And that's what I did for about 9 months. COVID hit and shut everything down. They wouldn't let me into the hospital to see her. I raised so much crap one night that an administrator gowned me up, put me in, said, you can see her for a few minutes, but says, don't expect for this to happen again because no one knew what COVID was. No one knew the protocol. I just raised so much hell they wanted to get me out of there. I went into that room and she was crying. She says, you have to get me out of here. I will not die in this room alone. You have to do something. Called the girls, told her I was bringing their mom home, set up hospice, moved a hospital bed in, set everything up the home. They both made arrangements. They moved back home and we were all together for the last 19 days before she passed away.
No.
Now, once again, people in AA showed up like only you all can do. You brought food, you brought coffee, you brought drink, you brought everything we needed. You gave me space when I needed. You surrounded me when I needed. You showed up for visitation that night and you packed that place. My two brother-in-laws asked, who are all these people? Says, our sister does not have this many friends. I said, this is my other family. This is my AA family. And they did not understand and they were completely blown away. Now, to be real honest, I really thought that was going to be my life for the rest of my life. I thought I would live there in St. Louis. I'd work at that dealership till I was probably 70 years old, retire, and that was going to be life. Well, higher power had a different scenario. Right before COVID hit, I was asked to go speak in Dallas, Texas at a conference. COVID
Hey,
hit.
I don't know if I told you this. This is where I'm in Dallas right now,
I
or the
know that.
Dallas
You
area.
probably know the people who invited me down there. I was asked to go down there. COVID shut everything down. 2 years later, Stu asked me, can I come down here? Can I set it up? He said, matter of fact, why don't you come down a couple days early? We'll play golf. Then we'll go to the conference. I said, that even sounds better. So we had all this set up about a month beforehand. He said, we got a problem. The hotel's double booked. They've moved us back 2 weeks. Can you still come? I said, yeah, I can. He goes, well, there's a problem. You can't come down and play golf and we can't hang out because I've got a commitment that I already committed to. So I won't be there, but I'll have a sponsee pick you up. So the sponsee picked me up, dropped me off at the hotel. So I was never even supposed to be here at this point in time. One of the other speakers was a fill-in because the lady had had emergency surgery and couldn't fly. She ended up being down there. The host took us all to dinner that night. I met this woman down there. Her best friend says we were sparking. I really have no idea what we was doing because I hadn't been on a date or anyone besides Debbie for 37 years. And I just knew we had a connection. So neither one of us was supposed to be there at the time this happened. And I believe this was a God thing. He brought us together. We dated long distance for a little over a year. I met her daughter out in LA. She came into Kansas City, met my daughter and grandson, met my other daughter out in Denver. Come to find out, AA is such a small world. My sponsor in St. Louis, her sponsor in California had known each other for over a decade. They'd been on panels together. They had spoken together. They knew what was going on before we even told them what was happening. And the time came I had to make a decision. I couldn't ask her to give up her life. She just made partner in a law firm that she had worked her entire career to get to. She has 30 years sobriety. I've got 28. I was in the car business. It wasn't like that was life threatening and changing. I just had to decide what to do. So we decided I'll put my house up for sale, see what happens. Put it up for sale. 9 hours later, I had 4 offers. Closed the deal in 18 days. I gave a 30-day notice at the dealership. Everybody in Missouri said I'd lost my mind. I was crazy. What am I moving to California for? Said, you have totally lost your mind. This is the only thing you've ever known. And for the first time in my life, this guy who was full of fear from 5 years old of what others thought of him, scared to death to do anything if you didn't give me that pat on the back. I was making this move with zero fear. I had no job moving out here, but I knew this woman was something extremely important and special to me. The second woman I've ever found in my life that made me feel even better than I'd ever felt. And I knew this was right. I packed up. I moved out there. About 2 months later, ended up having lunch with the president and CEO of the Midnight Mission. He hired me on the spot. I've been working for him since October last year. I am so excited what I do. My sponsor told me you need to always do 2 things in life. You need to work with a newcomer and you need to go somewhere once a week. You don't ever want to end up. I've got a couple of sponsees left from St. Louis. I got some sponsees out here, and I'm going into the hardest skid row 5 days a week. And believe me, I never want to end up there, but I'm giving back what was so freely given to me. Yvonne, I asked her to marry me. We're engaged. We're getting married next year. I have such a blessed life, and everything I have in my life today is 100% because of AA in this program. And I'll sum my life up with this. I believe in my higher power, and I believe in God. And I believe God brought Yvonne and I together in Dallas the way things happened. As long as I stay in the passenger seat of the car and I let my higher power drive, I may only get down the road at 55 miles an hour, but I stay between the white lines. But I'm an alcoholic. I want instant gratification. Sometimes I want to get down that road quicker, and I'll grab that steering wheel and I'll put my foot over on the foot feed, and we're driving 85, and I'm driving. And the next thing I know, I start driving that car right off in the ditch. Is what I do with my life when I'm in charge. And as soon as I let go of that steering wheel, God takes over. We back down to 55. We get down the road when we're supposed to. And miracles happen in this life because of AA. If you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to work the steps, and if you're willing to listen to what your sponsor tells you to do. Thank you.
You are quite welcome, Brent. Wow, I wasn't sure exactly where this was going. I appreciate your time. What a testimony, as they say. What is it saying, the third step about may God take away our difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those we would help of thy power and thy love and thy way of life. And you are a shining example of that, my friend. Wow. And we didn't get a chance to talk a lot before we got on, but you probably don't know this, but this podcast, these episodes are listen. There are many incarcerated individuals that are listening to this.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah. And so this is going to be, I mean, it'll resonate with anybody, but my guess is it'll resonate even more with them. And I just can't wait to release it. Yeah, nowadays, they have tablets. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I've been doing this for a while. All of a sudden, I started getting a lot of, communication from within the prison system. And I was going, how are they hearing this? And then I'd heard that they had tablets, and I think there's other ways that they're able to listen. But I'm so glad we got you on here, and I'm so glad you were able to come join me today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I always wrap it up here with page 164 from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It says, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Oh gosh, I'm thinking back to a couple of pieces now within your story, and I got chill bumps during a couple of them. And hey, anyway, I'm sorry to stop reading there,
Yeah.
but that's just what came to mind. It says, "Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find, and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit." And you will surely meet some of us, like me and Brent, as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Once again, my friend, thank you so much for coming on. And I'm going to reach out to Bill and just give him a big thank you for referring you over to me. God bless you.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, Bill and Karen and Ivana and I, we've been out to dinner a couple times, and he actually was at a conference and heard me speak. So we've really kind of had a bond since then. Yeah.
Yeah, he's such a good guy. All right, my friend. God bless you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Oh gosh, Brent, thank you so much one more time for your story. That was incredible. I'm sure the listeners got a lot out of that. And remember, folks, we do not want you sharing your toothbrush. However, we would love for you to pause your device and share that episode with another friend or family member. It may be just what they need today. Now, on to a little bit of listener feedback. Tony D, from Norway, writes in and he says, "Dear John, I just wanted to connect and say thank you again, my friend, for the wonderful service you and your team do. You are a beautiful man. Thank you for being sober. Best regards." And then I think this is best regards in Norwegian. Would it be Dutch? What do they speak in Norway? Anyway, it says Venlig Hilson / best regards, Tony D. And then I think this is some telephone number afterwards that I don't understand because I'm just a dumb American. But nonetheless, Tony, thank you so much. Thank you so much for writing in. And we are so happy you're listening over there in Norway. And thank you for what you do as well, my friend. Ted W. writes in, and Ted W. says, "Hi, John. My name is Ted W. I am from Greenville, South Carolina. I've been in and out of the program since 2010. I had 8 years of sobriety, and I went back out for 6 years. I came back in 2024, September of 2024. I think I realize now why I went back. I never really completely surrendered, and I didn't turn it over to my higher power. I still kept two lives, an AA life and another life. I didn't drink for 8 years, and I was on shaky ground and didn't know it until it was too late. Like most of the stories I hear, I started drifting away and then planned going back with a justification to make me feel better about the lie. This time, I am a more present. I'm on a more present spiritual plane, taking this in 100%. But the main reason for my email to you is this. On one of your podcasts, you, John, were talking about the quote movies in your head that you would have, and then you would have an involuntary twitch, and then suddenly, and when they suddenly appear. I was amazed that you brought that up because I have a similar thing going on almost daily. I have told this to my sponsors and others, and they don't understand what I'm talking about. Well, good news, bad news. I understand. I definitely understand. And he says, "I thought I was the only person that experiences this." And that's why we share our stories, right, my friend? Because this can relate, and we know we're not in, whether it's this issue or other issues, right? We know we're not the same only person experiencing these things. Anyway, and it says, "You told me that they went away after you did your fifth step. That's correct. Well, tomorrow I'm doing my second one in 14 years. Let's hope it has the same results because I really hate it. It's a way that I continually beat myself up. Well, just make sure you get it all out there. Don't leave any stone unturned, my friend. He says, I enjoy your podcast. It's excelente. Thank you for the affirmation there. But anyway, he says you also said you can send me an invite to your Facebook group. This is the email address I use for that. So send me an invite. I would like to be able to do something positive on Facebook other than going off into rabbit holes that don't have any relevance. Thanks again and keep up the good work. For those of you who are listening maybe for the first time and you do not understand what he's talking about there with the Facebook group, I sent that here's what you do. If you want to join the super secret Facebook group for Sober Speak, go to Facebook, search up Sober Speak Secret Group and ask for admission, and we will get you on in there. But thank you so much for writing in. And that was an excellent piece of feedback there as well. Adrian writes in, and Adrian says, "Hey, John." Hey, Adrian. He says, good to hear again the voice of David G. It's like one of the episodes from Star Wars, The Return of the Jedi. Yes, Mr. David G is like Return of the Jedi. He says, this is a kind of talk which I enjoy listening to, valuable for my recovery. I enjoyed when he said that people who stay sober are doing more or less the same thing as people who stay sober. And also, we thought that we have to tell people what we think. At the end of the day, no one will ask me what I thought. It's important what I have done during the day. The part with the relationships is on my list a long time. Sorry, my friend. I just want to get right I just want to be right. I need approval or to be enabled and emotionally I go wild. The prayer from page 64 really helps. I used to say, God save me from being angry and also divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. I'm so grateful that I'm sober and I have the chance to listen to your speakers. So grateful, Don Juanito. Thank you again for keeping the podcast running. Regards, Adrian. I can't remember. I think it may have been some guy named Rusty, or maybe it was Adrian. I can't remember. Somebody started calling me. Oh no. Don, I think it was Adrian calling me Don Juanito because I was talking about Don Juan or something at one point. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Adrian, from me, Mr. Don Juanito. Kathy writes in, and the subject line is step meetings. She said, "Hi, John. I listened to episode 382 with David G. David G. Has been mentioned again, and I really enjoyed it. May I please have his information on the step meetings? I have listened to your broadcasts about 4 years, and I appreciate them. Thank you, Kathy from Canada, with a big old Canadian flag there in her email. And as you know, Kathy, I got you in touch with Mr. David G. All right, everybody, that there is another episode of Sober Speak in the books. What is this? What did I say? 380. Well, now I'm just curious. 386. That's episode 386 in the books. As I always say, keep coming back. It works if you work it. I take this 1 week at a time, especially going into this surgery I'm having coming up. Who knows what's going to happen after that? And then the third thing is, I hope to be back next week, and may God bless you and keep you until then. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Love you guys. Bye-bye.